Okay, felt like I just literally finished Friday's program a moment ago. Oh, man. I am so stiff. Oh, that's what she said. Okay, it's time for another episode of Haff in the Morning, and it comes your way in 3, 2, 1. Coming up on today's episode of Haff in the Morning, will Trump refuse to take a salary as President of the United States? Was the Hillary Rodham Clinton photo faked? And 100-year-old Cubs fan dies a week after the World Series. Details on these stories, plus a whole lot more, await you on this edition of Haff in the Morning.
Welcome back to the Tax Channel. Last week we talked about the passive activity loss rule, and this week we're talking about the 1040-EZ. Before we get ahead of ourselves, I'd just like to talk about loss for a minute. It's been a tough year for me, which will be reflected in my forms.
Good Saturday morning, my friends. Welcome to another edition of Haff in the Morning for Saturday, November 12th, 2016. Yours truly, Joe Hafner, here back at the controls, producing another quality podcast. I didn't say it was going to be a good one. I just said a quality podcast, and for some reason my volume down control is not working. I don't know what the deal is. Let's try that one. Yeah, that works. Guess the button needs a little cleaning out. Brand new computer, and it has dust in it already. Boy, I really need to clean this thing off. Looks like somebody's been spitting all over it. Wonder who that could be. Joe. Anyway, welcome to the program, my friends, where we talk about anything and everything. And you can get in touch with me to talk about anything you'd like to discuss at haffinthemorning@gmail.com. That's HAFF in the morning@gmail.com. Or feel free to check out my website, tinyurl.com/haftermedia, tinyurl.com/Aftermedia, where I also encourage you to go to the sponsors page. I know I don't talk about that very much, but go to tinyurl.com/Aftermedia nonetheless, and check out all the great pages. Customize your own news page, weather page, sports page, and of course see the Haff in the Morning Facebook page, and a whole lot more. Again, tinyurl.com/Aftermedia. Well, we've survived another week, my friends, and we're into the weekend, at least for you. As for me, well, I've got to work all weekend. But I don't mind. I need the money anyway, right? That's what I tell myself whenever I have to work these crazy schedules. Well, let's get into the program where we talk about anything and everything. And starting off the program today, it wasn't long after Donald Trump's victory this week that questions about his taking a presidential salary began to circulate. What would happen to his business empire and income when the business mogul becomes president next year. Well, that's a scary thought, isn't it? Unless you're a Trump supporter. Well, from the very beginning, Trump has promised that he'd set businesses concern aside if he is elected. And he told the Face the Nation moderator, John Dickerson, last month that he's been phasing out his role throughout the campaign. And in addition, he's promised last year that he refused to take a salary as president, too. At least he made a mention of that. During a campaign appearance in Rochester, New Hampshire last October, the billionaire told crowd that he would not be accepting the $400,000 annual salary if he became POTUS. Trump says he would turn down U.S. presidential salary if elected by opposing views on YouTube. Well, on Federal Election Commission forms, Trump reported 2015 income exceeding $557 million, and he appeared to acknowledge in the final presidential debate that he avoided paying any federal income tax for several years, so he probably doesn't need the money anyway, even though he hasn't paid his taxes, according to some sources. Days later, Trump held a Twitter Q&A, encouraging the American people to ask him questions about using the hashtag #AskTrump. One user asked, "Will you forgo the presidential salary if elected?" Again, Trump confirmed that he would refuse to take a salary. "As far as the salary is concerned, I won't even take $1, he said. "I'm totally giving up my salary if I become president." So, if nothing else, I commend him for that. The problem is that I've read that, according to federal guidelines, you can't refuse the salary. Now, whatever you do with the money is your business, but federal law mandates that he get paid anyway, so he might donate the money to charity, I don't know, or maybe reinvest it somehow in some other venture, but according to federal guidelines, he has to take the salary anyway. Boy, imagine being forced to accept money. Well, according to Forbes' latest investigation released in September, the business magazine estimates Trump's wealth to be in the neighborhood of $3.7 billion, down $800 million from a year ago. Trump wouldn't be the first president to forego a salary. According to Snopes.com, he would be joining John F. Kennedy and Herbert Hoover, who both donated their entire presidential salaries to charity. So, if nothing else, the Donald won't be accepting a presidential salary. But nevertheless, that money still could be allocated, so you're not really doing anything other than saving a little face with some of your naive supporters. Well, speaking of naive supporters, have you seen that picture of Hillary Rodham Clinton supposedly out with Margot Gerster, I believe is her name. Margot Gerster, a mother hiking with her daughter, had with Hillary Clinton the day after losing the election. Well, it may not be what it has been made out to be. Yeah, the chance encounter a mother hiking with her daughter had with Hillary Clinton the day after losing the election may not be what it's been made out to seem. Margot Gerster was out hiking with her daughter when she ran into Hillary and Bill Clinton in the upstate New York town of Chappaqua, where the Clintons have a home, earlier this week. She took a photo with the former First Lady, who beamed from ear to ear, appearing to have had the weight of the world lifted from her shoulders as she stood next to Gerster. Clinton was said to have been out walking her dogs with former President Bill Clinton, wherein Gerster spotted them. Okay? Well, the chance encounter Gerster had with Clinton gained national media attention, as it was the first time Clinton had been photographed following her loss in the Tuesday election. However, some critics allege that their meeting while hiking was staged and not random at all. Oh, a politician would never, ever stage a photograph now, would they? Well, adding more fuel to those claims is the fact that it's actually not the first time that they have met. When Gerster was in high school, her mother had a fundraiser for Clinton at Crabtree's Kittle House in Chappaqua. Well, Gerster and her sister posed for a photo with Clinton inside the restaurant, which happens to be one of the politician's favorites, as the siblings smiled next to a beaming Clinton. Well, the fundraiser their family hosted may have been during the period of time when Clinton was running for senator, or when she served as senator for the state of New York. Well, the caption Gerster wrote for the most recent photo of her with Clinton this week said that she was so heartbroken after the Democrats' stunning loss, and Gerster has since removed both photos from her Facebook profile. So, chances are the whole thing may have been staged. Well, don't want to be cynical, but yeah, I think that's more likely the case. Okay? Alrighty. And one other story to pass along before we get to the CBS Weekend Roundup here in a few minutes, as well as market summary for the weekend. We'll have the President's Weekly Radio Address here in just a moment. 108-year-old Cubs fan dies 1 week after the World Series. Yeah. Mabel Ball had it in her to wait one more week. A lifelong Chicago Cubs fan, the 108-year-old woman died Tuesday, 6 days after watching her beloved Cubbies win the World Series. The cruel irony, the most unbelievable irony, is that the person who waits and waits and waits and waits after it happens says, "I've done what I've got to do, and I'm out of here." Her son Rich told the Chicago Tribune's Irv Levitt, "It ain't funny, but it is funny." Well, before Ball died, she was interviewed by the Tribune in a local TV station. When her son asked her what she thought about being something of a celebrity, her response was priceless. "It's a lot of nonsense," she told him. But nevertheless, she got to see the Cubs win at last, and looking at a picture of her in her hospital bed with a big grin on her face and holding the copy of the Chicago Tribune the day after the Cubs win that says "At Last." And I have a copy of that newspaper in my Kindle. No, in my Nook. Yeah, I got it from Barnes & Noble. Anyway, those are a few stories to pass along to you on this Saturday. Now, what do you say we take care of a little bit of business here? And, of course, yesterday was Veterans Day here in the United States. And here to pay another tribute, I should say, to the veterans of the United States, of course, is the Commander-in-Chief. He's the President of the United States. Here's Barack Hussein Obama on this edition of Haff in the Morning with his weekly radio address.
Hi, everybody. This weekend, as we search for ways to bridge our differences, we look to the principles that are more enduring than politics. And some of the best examples are found in the men and women we saluted yesterday and every day, our troops and our veterans. It is the example of young Americans, our 9/11 generation, who as first responders ran into smoldering towers, ran to a recruiting center, and signed up to serve. It's the example of a military that meets every mission, one united team, all looking out for one another, all getting each other's backs. It's the example of the single most diverse institution in our country, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, who represent every corner of our country, every shade of humanity, immigrant and native-born, Christian, Muslim, Jew, and non-believer alike, all forged into common service. It's the example of veterans, patriots, who, when they take off their fatigues, put back on the camouflage of everyday life in America, becoming small business people and teachers and coaches, our first responders and city council members, and neighborhood role models, all still serving this country we love with the same sense of duty and valor. Our veterans don't always go around telling stories of their heroism, so it is up to us to ask, to listen, to tell those stories for them, and to live in our own lives the values for which they were prepared to give theirs. It's up to us to summon some of the courage and humility of our veterans, and to acknowledge that we could never serve them in quite the same way that they serve us, but we can try. We need to keep working to make sure they always get the care and benefits they've earned. We can practice kindness. We can volunteer, serve, and respect one another. We can always get each other's backs, and we can show how much we love our country by loving our neighbors as ourselves. To all of you who served and who still do, thank you, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Coming up in just a moment on this edition of Haff in the Morning, I'll have market information, the weekend market information report from NPR Radio. Right now, though, we'll take a look at what's going on in the exciting world of news with Fox Radio News here in just a moment. At the start of the program, you heard this ad.
Welcome back to the Tax Channel. Last week we talked about the...
Anyway, that's my old frat brother and acquaintance from college, Bill Cott. C-H-O-T-T, Bill Cott. And anyway, he was an upperclassman when I was a freshman, obviously. And we went to school together and met a few times. He is a hysterically funny guy. Well, anyway, he's done some various commercials and spots in TV shows and movies over the years. A great actor, great comedian, and real cut-up, real down-to-earth fellow all at the same time. Well, he's been in movies like Crossfire, Tomorrow Night, Galaxy Quest, Dude, Where's My Car?, The Rum Diary. You might remember him in Wizards of Waverly Place, and most recently in Marshall the Miracle Dog. Well, now he's doing an ad for Amazon.com, and I just saw the spot here a little bit ago, and check it out on YouTube. So, CHOTT. And if you need more proof that he was in other movies, such as Galaxy Quest, you might remember him briefly in this particular scene.
By Grabthar's hammer, by the sons of Warvan, I shall avenge you.
Anyway, that's when the late, great Alan Rickman snatched that picture of himself and gave the autograph in that scene in Galaxy Quest. So congratulations, Bill, and continue to admire what you're doing in Hollywood and the lives that you touch in so many, many ways. Well, rolling on with the program, we'll check in with NPR here in about 5 minutes. Right now, though, let's get a brief update on what's going on in the news. And here is Fox News Radio.
I'm Joe Chiro. Another day of demonstrators protesting Donald Trump's winning the presidency. Several hundred people gather in New York City's Union Square. We reject the president-elect. We reject. 200 people were arrested last night in Los Angeles after a mostly peaceful march, but things got rowdy in Portland, Oregon. Hundreds marched through the city, disrupting traffic and spray painting graffiti. One person was shot and wounded in a confrontation with a man who drove off. There's also a protest in Cincinnati for a different reason. A judge declared a mistrial in the case of a former police officer charged with killing an unarmed black driver last year.
This is what democracy looks like.
The Hamilton County prosecutor says jurors were leaning toward a lesser conviction of voluntary manslaughter instead of murder, but they couldn't reach agreement. 4 Americans were killed this morning in a suicide attack inside Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan.
2 were U.S. service members, 2 U.S. contractors. 16 other Americans were injured. Military officials say the attacker apparently entered the base with a group of Afghan laborers. The Taliban has claimed responsibility. How the attack was pulled off, though, remains under investigation. Bagram Air Base is where top U.S. officials, including the president, fly into when visiting Afghanistan because of its heavy security. The base remains locked down. So far, no word on the identities of those killed. In Jerusalem, John Huddy, Fox News.
Police in Anchorage, Alaska say an officer has been shot multiple times in what they describe as an ambush. The man suspected of shooting the officer was killed. The officer expected to survive. Protesters are blocking a construction yard for the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline in North Dakota. Earlier today, a caravan of cars left the protest camps and arrived in Mandan, where the protesters blocked an intersection. You're listening to Fox News Radio. Fair, balanced.
On the next episode of Recipes for Disaster.
So we've got our neighbor Paul coming over tonight for a barbecue, which is why I prepared a delicious lemon rosemary steak marinade from my special collection of old family recipes. To make sure the steaks are extra, extra, extra tender, I left them marinating out on the counter overnight, just like Nana used to.
Maria may mean well, but without food safety, it never ends well. Always thaw or marinate foods in the refrigerator at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, or you could make your friends and family really sick. Maria's neighbor Paul didn't think twice about the steak he ate until he was presenting his company's financial forecast to the board. That's when a sudden bout of food poisoning made it explicitly clear that profits weren't the only thing on the rise. Watch Recipes for Disaster at foodsafety.gov. You'll learn the right steps as Maria does everything wrong. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
There's been a string of racially charged incidents at schools and universities around the country since Election Day, including cyber threats targeting schools in Pennsylvania.
One online attack references lynching using the N-word and adding black freshmen at the University of Pennsylvania to a list of names. The source of the account, which officials said appears to be based in Oklahoma, was under investigation. The Penn president calls the account and its messages disgusting and deplorable. Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney condemning it as heartbreaking, saying everyone is welcome in Philadelphia. At the York County School of Technology, reports of minority students threatened and harassed for weeks, including black students called slaves. One Mexican teen told she'd be sent over the wall. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf says it's overt racism, vowing to end it and pledging state resources to any schools affected. Lisa Brady, Fox News.
What's next for Obamacare? And how does the GOP plan to repeal and replace it? Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess on Fox and Friends.
Going forward, there will be a new Congress sworn in. This will come through the committees of jurisdiction. The new Congress will actually decide on the policies. The good news is that we've now got a willing partner down in the White House who's at least willing to talk to us about this. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to have been frozen out. And I think Democrats, if they were honest, would admit this as well.
Congressman Burgess is a medical doctor and OBGYN. Hundreds of thousands of people flooded Seoul streets today, demanding the resignation of President Park Geun-hye amid an explosive political scandal, what may be South Korea's largest protest since it shook off dictatorship 3 decades ago. Protesters also marched on a road in front of the Palace Gate near the mountainside presidential office, and residents carrying candles, blowing horns, and banging drums while shouting for Park to resign. I'm Joe Chiro, Fox News Radio.
And you're listening to Haff in the Morning on this Saturday, November 12th, 2016. Coming up in just a moment, I'll have Marketplace Weekend update for you as we roll through the Saturday together. And then have the CBS Weekend Roundup. Look back at the big stories this week. Gee, I wonder what their lead story is going to be this week. Well, you remember a couple of months ago on this program when I recorded a video for live, for Kelly Ripa. Well, it seems that a Pennsylvania high school teacher by the name of Richard Curtis admitted that he was between Fantastic and Wake Up Richard or Dreaming when he returned to guest host Live with Kelly last Monday morning. Curtis was the winner of the daytime talk show's co-host search and beat out thousands of entrants for a chance to sit next to Kelly Ripa. The 30-year-old educator was such a hit as guest co-host last month that he was invited back. And sporting a new haircut, Curtis said he got the call asking him to come back to Live in the middle of a school day and threw a chair up in the air with excitement. Hope nobody was under that chair. It's amazing how daytime talk shows have taken over the school, he quipped. While Curtis has become quite the local celebrity in his hometown, he noted that a drink was named after him at a local restaurant. His 5-year-old daughter was not so impressed with her father's new gig. Curtis recalled that his little girl told her grandmother that it's not like he's on the Disney Channel. But nevertheless, there was a winner in that contest, and it wasn't yours truly. But I'm not bitter.
This Marketplace podcast is brought to you by Investors.com. See which stocks are moving today at Investors.com. You'll get proprietary stock lists, ratings, and tools to make smarter investing decisions. Get a free 4-week trial at investors.com/weekend.
And by the Spark Cash Card from Capital One. Get 2% cash back and start putting thousands of dollars back into your small business. Spark is offering a $500 bonus for spending $4,500 on the card within the first 3 months. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/smallbusiness.
We are going to start the show with a few sounds of this week.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory.
Being your candidate has been one of the greatest honors of my life.
The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy. And over the next few months, we are going to show that to the world.
And over the next hour, plus the coming weeks and months, we'll look at President-elect Trump's policies and what we know about them. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and this is Marketplace Weekend, where the economy meets real life. There are many places where potential Trump policy will touch all of our lives. We can't get through all of them today, but we're devoting most of this show to examining them with our fantastic Marketplace team and guests. We also want you to reach out to us, so come talk at marketplace.org, on our Facebook page, or on Twitter. We're at Marketplace WKND. We will start the show with a special post-election version of our segment Long and Short, That's when we borrow terms from the world of finance and ask our guests to go long, that is, bet on, or short and bet against topics in the news. This week, we have Jillian White, a senior associate editor at The Atlantic, and Joe Weisenthal, host of What'd You Miss on Bloomberg TV. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I am excited to kick these things around with you guys because you are both so thoughtful about economics, the election, where all of these things intersect. Jillian, I want you to start. In this post-election world, what are you long?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that a lot of us have seen if you're looking at the market in post-Trump land is that Trump trades have done really well. And among the things that have done really well that are Trump-related are coal stocks. You know, one of the things that Trump said during his campaign was that one of his first plans, if he was elected, was that he was going to reverse many of President Obama's energy policies. What Trump wants to do instead is kind of double down on domestic energy, on oil, on fossil fuels, and what people have termed clean coal. So clean coal is a little bit of a misnomer, but essentially it is a process by which coal is still used for energy, but it goes through a process where it releases less carbon dioxide, fewer greenhouse gases, but it's still not clean. It's still problematic for the environment. Lots of environmentalists and environment experts have said that it helps a little, but it still puts us in the same place.
But how do you pull a long position out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that clean coal and clean coal related corporations are just going to do well. Everything that Trump has said that he will boost and put money behind and put effort behind has done really well in the stock market this week. Even if you don't believe that clean coal is an actual thing, betting on it might be a good bet right now.
I am really sort of fascinated by the energy question, in part because a lot of the people who don't like the direction where we've gone with energy seem to be complaining about private sector innovation and changes that are kind of passing by policy. I mean, coal has obviously been on the decline for a while, and they ascribe to it political reasons for it, when in fact we have more abundant, cheaper alternatives. Natural gas is one. Solar is getting extraordinarily cheap. Solar, it's weird because solar is so politically loaded as a concept. Mm-hmm. I think maybe at one point people just associated it with like hippies, and they thought it could only survive with like incredible subsidies.
Well, and sort of the Solyndra story got folded into
but
that.
It's just the pace of collapse of solar prices and the cheapness of energy coming from solar is really surpassing the political story here. And so it feels like a lot of these people who sort of like romanticize coal are, you know, it's kind of like everything else with this, are romanticizing something that is not so easily brought back just with policy changes.
Joe, I'm actually going to bring up your short because I think it sticks with this market-centric way of looking at a Trump presidency. Those two dovetail kind of nicely. Tell us about your short.
Well, we've had this extraordinary era of very low interest rates and low inflation, and we've had this sort of all within this economic regime since the late 80s, which is sort of, you know, fiscal discipline. And I think it's possible that we're going to see a sort of serious change on the fiscal front. We have a president-elect who has promised major tax cuts, who has promised all kinds of bridges and hospitals and schools or anything. And we have a Republican Party that I would be very surprised if they do anything to hold his feet to the fire or stick to their previous beliefs about fiscal conservatism. And this is a situation we just haven't had in a long time, and you're already seeing it reflect in the bond market and interest rates. Yield on the 10-year Treasury has surged above 2% in the wake of the election. People are expecting a very serious fiscal boost.
I think it's really interesting to watch what happens in the first, well, I guess towards the end of this year and then entering 2017 when it comes to the Fed and policy. I would agree with Joe that, you know, I think the conversation surrounding what to do with rates has focused a lot on the fact that, you know, we were pushing towards full employment, low unemployment for years, and seemingly we are there. But I think there's still a lot of question around what exactly full employment would look like for everyone. And the Fed
because there are
was
so
saying,
many people who are underemployed as well.
Right, exactly. So I think we have some of these weird conversations that are happening. And also we have, you know, low labor force participation that it seems like no one quite knows what to do with or how to explain away. But yeah, I mean, they were talking about raising rates as soon as December. So I do wonder what happens now under a Trump presidency, how quickly things change and in what direction they go.
I want to spin to both of your other positions because they take us sort of from the realm of economic to the social and how we communicate with one another. Jillian, tell me about your short.
Yeah, so Joe, I think you might have something to say on this too. I'm short on Facebook. I think that prior to the election, and especially in the wake of it, people are thinking a lot about how they communicate, how they get news, how they participate in their communities. And Facebook has somewhere around 2 billion users. It is huge in terms of the way we communicate our thoughts and our beliefs, political or otherwise. And Neiman Lab had a really interesting piece this week on why the media was so wrong about Trump and was so wrong about this election. And there are a wide array of theories. But a lot of people are talking about Facebook and the fact that it the algorithm as it stands kind of first reinforces the beliefs and opinions that people already hold, but also that it promotes what Neiman Lab called a sewer of misinformation.
So many pieces of fake news.
Exactly. So many things that just are not factually true or from accurate or reliable sources, and those things got promoted in a crazy way. And I think it's really going to make people think and wonder about the platform that they're using to gather all of their information and to make what they think or assume are fact-based opinions.
I think Jillian is completely correct. You know, we talk a lot about filter bubbles and people only getting information that confirms their beliefs, and I certainly think that's a problem, and I think that obviously fake news is probably indefensible by any objective measure. But I think
we're three journalists who think fake news is bad.
But I think there's another factor here that is also really important, which is the sort of reconceptualization of identity in the world of social media. And by that I mean maybe 20 years ago, someone in Milwaukee might have seen themselves like, oh, I'm an Irish American and I'm an accountant and I'm a Packers fan. Now they might think of themselves like, oh, I'm a white man and I'm under threat and I identify with other whites under threat in Europe when I read about immigration and I sympathize with Vladimir Putin and stuff like that. That may be an exaggeration, but I think that this is a really big deal, which is that the idea being like people create new ways of thinking about themselves based on the information that they get. And in a broadcast or a print world in which there's sort of one national community, I think there's some pretty startling sort of fragmentations of the nation itself that's being caused by social media.
Yeah.
Do companies then that act in many ways as unofficial gatekeepers of information, do they have a responsibility to address this? Or do we say, you know what, one of the tenets of this country is the First Amendment and people can say what they want to say?
I mean, my first thought on the fake news thing, it's definitely should be a serious problem that they address. I think on the bigger questions of how social media sort of realigns society, I'm not all that optimistic that there's any obvious way that, and some of it's for the better. I mean, not all of it's bad or anything. I just think that like there's some new like divisions and new organizations within society that some for better, some for worse are going to change our democracy.
Yeah, and I also think a lot of what happens with these private companies and how they get involved in disseminating this information has a lot to do with how we as users choose to accept or reject these platforms.
Joe, we're going to go from a modern type of community to, I guess, the oldest community in the book? Tell me you're long.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly how to go long this from a trade perspective, but I have this theory that there's going to be an uptick in religious participation in U.S. life because I think we live in a time in which people feel that the institutions that are durable, that they assumed would be timely, are not as solid as perhaps they thought. And I could see people from all political ideologies and different walks of life finding comfort and stability in religion, and so wanting to go back to churches and synagogues and mosques as a way to connect with something that feels timeless, that doesn't feel like it's wildly under flux, that feels like a shelter from an uncertain moment.
So I actually am totally on board with this long. I would say that in the past week, at least 4 to 5 people who I've known for over 5 years who I've never heard bring up religion or any type of higher belief system in any capacity. We're talking about going to actual places of organized religion and kind of relying on a higher power to move forward. I was a little shocked, but I think that's completely right. When, things kind of get out of hand or are so shocking, people try to rely on some way to explain them away or to, think about how things can be better in the future or whatever it might be. But yeah, I would agree with that. I think people are definitely going long religion right now.
Jillian White from The Atlantic, Joe Weisenthal from Bloomberg, thank you both very much.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks, Lizzie.
There's more Marketplace Weekend just ahead.
This Marketplace podcast is brought to you by Charles Tirrett. Guys, we know how important it is for you to have well-fitted clothes for going to work or going out. You don't want that baggy look around your stomach and arms, so you've got to check out Charles Tirrett. They are exquisitely crafted, crease-free shirts. One CT shirt normally costs $100, but right now you'll get 3 shirts for just $99. Go to ctshirts.com/market. That's ctshirts.com/market.
And by Lenovo. Imagine you have house guests coming, but only one bedroom. What if you can order an extra bedroom for your guests that you could remove after they leave? That's the idea behind Lenovo's next-generation data centers built for cloud computing. The cloud is all about giving your company the ability to expand and contract server space on demand without actually adding more hardware. Lenovo understands that on-demand access can give your company a tremendous competitive advantage. Think about it. The faster you can scale up, the faster your development team can test new applications, and that means you can get new product features into market faster. But that kind of flexibility is worthless if your servers are down. Lenovo servers are #1 in reliability and performance. Feeling handcuffed by proprietary hardware and software relationships? Lenovo systems allow you to partner with leading software providers to ensure your cloud solution is best in class. Lenovo systems can even integrate with legacy software platforms to help get your cloud solution up and running quickly. Learn more about how Lenovo is transforming the data center at lenovo.com/datacenter.
You already know we are all about the numbers here at Marketplace, and an election brings with it a lot of numbers. Our By the Numbers blog follows the biggest and most important ones every day. So here are producers Tony Wagner and Cerise Castle with this week's election news by the numbers. Lead us off, Tony.
Thanks, Lizzie. Our first number is
15 million.
That's how many jobs the U.S. economy has added since the recovery began in 2010. We're in one of the longest recovery periods in history.
But not everyone is feeling it, and that's part of what propelled Donald Trump to the White House.
Exit polling from the New York Times found 83% of Democrats say the economy is doing excellent, and about the same portion of Republicans said it was doing poorly. $10 billion.
That's what Donald Trump's lawyer said the president-elect's business is worth in an interview with Politico this week.
The Trump Organization is privately held, and stop us if you've heard this one before, Trump isn't releasing his tax returns, so it's tough to know what his assets are actually worth.
At any rate, critics are worried Trump's business is a multi-billion-dollar conflict of interest.
Traditionally, presidents' investments are managed by a third-party blind trust. In this case, Trump has said his 3 eldest children will manage the Trump Organization.
45%.
That's how much shares of Corrections Corporation of America jumped Wednesday.
Private prison stocks surged on the news of Donald Trump's election. They're real estate companies, and Trump has supported privatization of government services.
The rally got Corrections Corp pretty close to its August share price, which tanked after the Obama administration announced it would phase out private prisons.
Now that we're a few days out from the results of the election, it is time to do what we do best. What I talked about at the top of the show, dig into policy. And to be clear, there's a lot we don't know yet, but there are things that we do. So to start off our discussion of Donald Trump's presidency, we bring in our own Washington bureau chief, Andrea Seabrook. Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
So you have been saying really this entire election season that this is about insiders versus outsiders. And if we think about this election, there's certainly a strong argument to be made that the results bore that out. What is your post-election take on this insider-outsider dynamic?
I think that Donald Trump
won in large part because he tapped into this deep feeling of loss or potential loss of standing in the economy and in our culture in general, but definitely in the economy, among people who live in former industrial states of the United States, basically what we call the Rust Belt. But it's more than that. It's more than just Trump appealing to those people. The Democratic Party also lost this election because it didn't. The Democratic Party had the chance to appeal to those people. And I think as much as Donald Trump won because he appealed to disaffected Americans, economically disaffected especially, Hillary Clinton lost because she didn't appeal to those same people.
And we can't ignore race in this. Even if you look at the income breakdown brackets, it certainly breaks down by race.
That is absolutely true. You can't talk about who voted for whom without looking at that because, while it's absolutely not true, of course, that all white people voted for Trump, it is true the other way around, that almost all of the people who voted for Trump were white. Or are white. And what is striking about that, I mean, it's very common for a presidential candidate to appeal to certain groups of people. Usually it's a cross-section of race, class, location, that sort of thing. In this case, the people who voted for Trump spanned across educational and economic divides. People who made less than $20,000 a year, people who made more than $200,000. People who have haven't finished high school, people who have PhDs. The electorate that voted for Trump, the demographics there are striking because the one thing that brings them together is their race.
I want to shift to governing, because governing in many ways and putting together a transition team, a cabinet, all of those things, that's an insidery move. So let's say you are Donald Trump and you don't have the cabinet in waiting that I think a lot of folks thought the Clinton campaign has. How do you do that? Does that mean you do tap old party hands? You do tap lobbyists? And if you do that, how do you not alienate all the people who voted for you?
The thing is, Lizzie, I can't say strong enough how different this election and this incoming administration is from the way Washington has worked for decades, if not a century. I mean, I have never seen, no one has seen in a century, a presidential candidate less affiliated with his own party or his stated party, less beholden to that party, with fewer ties to the lobbyists and thinkers of that party. And so a lot of those people kind of eschewed his candidacy in the first place. We don't know who's going to want to work for him and who he's going to want to work for him.
So let's talk about some of his promises. Let's play our first clip, which focuses on trade and jobs.
I'll bring back our jobs from China, from Mexico, from Japan, from so many places. I'll bring back our jobs and I'll bring back our money.
Okay, Andrea. Can that happen?
Well, no. I mean, if what he means is that we're going to bring back the jobs that went to those places, it is unlikely to the point of impossible that those jobs will come back. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One, manufacturing has changed drastically. If those jobs, if the manufacturing processes that used to be here, say textile, steel, pick an industry that used to be here were to come back, they would not be performed by people. There would be a decimation of the number of jobs in those industries in the first place. They already are. If what he is saying is that we will bring jobs, not bring back those jobs, but bring jobs, well, then there are a lot of opportunities for that, but it takes a kind of commitment to social policy that we haven't necessarily seen. You can lay down tariffs on other countries importing things here and hope that means that American businesses will recreate industry here. But like I said, that doesn't necessarily create jobs, and it's likely to start a trade war. It is much more likely that what we will see if the incoming Trump administration really gets serious about creating jobs for people is, a much higher commitment to retraining,
to sort of, figuring out what there is now and how people can get into those jobs, you just can't go back 50 years.
Essentially, all of our recent presidents have increased executive power. We have heard a lot from the president-elect about executive orders. I want to play that clip.
We're going to eliminate every unconstitutional executive order and restore the rule of law to our land.
I'm curious how that plays out once he assumes the presidency. What do you think we can expect to see on that front?
Well, I think there are a few things you can count on Trump vacating as soon as he comes in. Climate change agreements, on EPA regulations. Some trade executive orders are available for that. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP negotiations. There are some healthcare orders that support Obamacare that aren't actually in the legislation that he can repeal immediately. Deferred action for what President Obama calls, the dreamers. These are the children of undocumented immigrants who are themselves undocumented, who get deferred action on their immigration status. I mean, these are things that you can pretty much count on Donald Trump at least taking a very critical eye to, if not completely vacating the moment he gets in. But let's talk about the root cause here. The reason that so much is done these days by the executive branch, both in executive orders and, frankly, regulations coming from executive branch agencies, is because the Congress itself has been deadlocked, with a few small exceptions, for, a couple of decades. And whenever you have like a vacuum of power like that, where, people can't respond, Congress can't respond out of deadlock to something facing the United States, then the executive branch is able to come in and put in an executive order that, because of the deadlock, Congress can't either supplant or, figure out a way around. The thing that's interesting to me with Donald Trump coming in and vacating a lot of executive orders is that he will also have, ostensibly, a stronger Congress because Republicans are in control of both the House and the Senate, and with a Republican president, that could change things.
Does that mean, since Congress controls the purse strings, that they are likely to fund some other parts of his agenda, a wall, say, on the border with Mexico, or significant infrastructure spending?
I think infrastructure is a place where we can expect to see real movement. And Donald Trump is coming in at the same time saying, we're going to stimulate, the economy with all of this infrastructure, create new jobs and everything, but also we're going to cut taxes. And the problem he's going to have is that the moment you say my priority is to cut corporate taxes and the middle class income tax and so on and so forth, you start draining the treasury of your ability to actually invest in those things. So, the great horse trade will begin and has already begun, I promise you.
Andrea Seabrook, our Washington Bureau Chief, thank you so much.
It is a pleasure, Lizzie.
You heard Andrea talk about some potential Trump policies, and she mentioned one area we're going to really dive into now: international trade and jobs.
I'm going to tell our NAFTA partners that I intend to immediately renegotiate the terms of that agreement to get a better deal by a lot, not just a little, by a lot for our workers. We're losing $500 billion in trade with China. Who the hell cares if there's a trade war? Trade war. We're going to get Apple to start building their damn computers and things in this country instead of in other countries.
To talk us through all of this, we turn to our Washington correspondent, Nancy Marshall-Genzer. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
We heard a number of clips of the president-elect talking about trade deals, talking about ripping them up. What could trade deals potentially look like under President Trump if he keeps his promises?
Right. I mean, you heard him say he's going to withdraw from NAFTA and rip it up. He also says he's going to withdraw from negotiations over the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a trade deal we've been negotiating with Pacific Rim countries. So, yeah, he can definitely rip up these trade agreements. But the question is, would that lead to a trade war? Donald Trump says that's not a big deal, but other people say it really is. And one of those people is Chad Bown. He's with the Peterson Institute for International Economics.
Ripping up a trade agreement, we can't do that unilaterally. That means the trading partner gets to rip up the trade agreement too, and they get to start over. And if we refuse to import from them, they will quite clearly refuse to import from us. And so that means everybody in the United States that works for a company that produces something, a good or a service, that exports it to that trading partner is also going to suffer.
So none of these things that Donald Trump is talking about can be done without having some kind of reaction from our trading partners, right? Whether it's a trade war or other negative consequences. Another thing that Trump has talked about is he says he's going to direct the Secretary of the Treasury to label China a currency manipulator. And there are ramifications there, too, because the idea is China is keeping its currency really low. That makes its exports really cheap. And the U.S. says, hey, that's not fair. But the thing is, even if we said, hey, China, you're a currency manipulator, and we raise tariffs on Chinese exports, sure, factories might leave China, but would they come to the U.S.? I asked Chad Bown about that.
If we think about the goods that we currently buy from China, so, say the iPhone, if we decided, as Mr. Trump has proposed, to threaten to impose a 45% tariff on imports coming in from China, yes, that may make it so that nobody wants to produce their electronic good in China and send it to the United States, but they wouldn't necessarily bring it back to the United States, that production. They might move it to Vietnam or Korea or Japan or, one of dozens of other countries out there that potentially have lower costs of production for these types of manufactured goods than are possible in the United States.
And Lizzie, even if those factories did move back to the U.S., there's no guarantee they would be in the Rust Belt. Maybe they would go to Alabama or Arkansas. There's no guarantee they'd go to Pennsylvania or Michigan.
Well, so a couple of things I want to point out here. We heard earlier in those clips an assertion of a $500 billion trade deficit. It is actually, for the first 10 months of this year, at $208 billion between the U.S. and China. And we should also note that the yuan, the Chinese currency, has actually been rising as opposed to depreciating. But when we look at all of these things in total, you mentioned the Rust Belt. We talked a bit about manufacturing jobs with Andrea Seabrook earlier in the show. So I guess one of the questions, since Andrea has noted how difficult it would be to bring back the kind of factory jobs of the 50s and 60s, how does President-elect Trump then square his promises to the Rust Belt with economic reality?
That would be really difficult, if not impossible. I mean, look, we can't bring back 1950s, 1960s manufacturing. We're not going to have that kind of economy again. And that's what I think a lot of Trump voters want and what they expect from him. I talked to one guy, his name is Joe Del Signor. He's in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, big steel town, big coal town. He says, okay, we can't go back to the way it was 50, 60 years ago, but he does expect a big resurgence in the coal mines. We'll see if that happens. But the fact is that people need to retrain for today's information economy. And I asked Chad Bown if that's possible.
We don't currently have the programs in place in the United States to make it possible. And I think that's the big question. Can a President Trump reimagine the labor market adjustment policies, the education policies, to help those workers make that adjustment? And I think that's the key question. It's going to be really impossible to go back to the 1960s. So can he help these folks transition into the 21st century economy?
Nancy, when you spoke to the gentleman in Johnstown or in other places, did they think he could help them do that?
It's funny, the people that I talked to weren't really focused on the information economy so much. They were focused more on the steel factories, the coal mines, and also the trains that don't run through town anymore. There used to be trains, carrying steel and coal out of Johnstown constantly, and that's not happening anymore. I did talk to a professor named Alan Meltzer at Carnegie Mellon University, which, of course, is right there in Pittsburgh, another big steel town. And he did talk more about the information economy. He said, look, we've got high-tech companies moving to Pittsburgh, healthcare companies, and they are going to need workers. But he said so far, government retraining programs just haven't worked. And the only people who've gotten jobs out of them are the trainers themselves. So clearly we've got to find some way to get these workers into the information economy because, like I said, we're not going back 50, 60 years.
Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's more Marketplace Weekend just ahead. Healthcare is more than 17% of our economy. And of course, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, came up a lot in this election. President-elect Trump has promised to repeal it, and Republicans in the House and Senate would also like to do that. So, is the ACA toast? From the health desk at WHYY, our reporter Dan Gorenstein is here to help answer that question. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Lizzie.
So, we have heard the mantra of repeal and replace or repeal and reform. Do we know at this point what the future of the Affordable Care Act looks like right now?
No. Simply, I mean, honestly, I think there have been all kinds of variations of if somebody tells you they know what to expect, they're lying. The best we can go on really is a plan that was introduced by Speaker Ryan that ultimately passed the House and the Senate, ultimately vetoed by President Obama. But that's really sort of a starting point in the conversation.
Well, what is in Speaker Paul Ryan's plan, if we were to say that may be the jumping-off point for a Trump presidency health care plan?
Without getting too deep into the details, one thing that I've learned in the past couple of days is that a lot of the ideas in the Affordable Care Act are similar to the ideas in the Ryan plan. So the Ryan plan would most likely keep exchanges. The subsidies, though, would be skimpier. It's an open question as to whether or not Medicaid expansion would continue or in what form. So if right now, today, you have Medicaid because you are part of that expanded population, you may have it, you may not. I think those are key things. I think open questions here, Lizzie, and these are really important, are what would happen to the provision in the Affordable Care Act that says children up to age 26 can stay on their parents' health plans. And then another really important one, particularly if you have a pre-existing health condition, is right now insurers have to take your business if you want. In the past, before the Affordable Care Act, if you had a pre-existing condition, insurers could say, you know what, you're going to be sick, you're going to be expensive, forget it. I don't want to do business with you. Today, under the ACA, they have to do business with you. We don't know what's going to happen with that provision going forward under a Paul Ryan plan, although it does discuss it.
Those are two things that you mentioned that are extremely popular with consumers. And when we think about the Affordable Care Act, a lot of people focus on the healthcare marketplaces. We should note most Americans still get their insurance from their work or from something like Medicare or Medicaid. So when we think about what a reform, repeal, whatever of the ACA could look like, can we know what this means for consumers?
So, there are 22 million people, approximately 20-some million people who now have insurance coverage thanks to the Affordable Care Act. Potentially, some of the benefits they enjoy right now under the Affordable Care Act could go away. I've talked to a couple of people, conservative health policy types, who've said, there are some people who are currently enjoying benefits that probably will not have those benefits. We don't know what to expect, and there's all kinds of debate. But if you're sick today, Lizzie, you have to be paying attention very closely.
Some of these things require congressional authorization. Are there things that President Trump could do on day one without Congress?
Yes, a lot of what President Obama has done with the Affordable Care Act, because he hasn't gotten much cooperation from Congress, has been done through the executive branch. One of those things is funding a certain type of subsidy for some people who are buying insurance on the exchanges. Donald Trump, day one, could go in and cut those subsidies. That would make it harder for people to afford their insurance, and that would perhaps likely end up encouraging more insurers to pull out of selling insurance on the marketplaces. But it seems like a Trump administration is not just going to do the repeal. There's also going to be a replace element. So I think Trump is in a difficult position here where there's the campaign rhetoric, repeal and replace day one, with the responsibility of governing and knowing that there are millions of people out there who have benefits, and do you really want to cut them off at the knees? I think that, too, is an open question.
We are having this conversation in the period of time known as open enrollment. That is when people, sign up for their health care plans. And so, yes, there's a lot we can't know on a policy level yet. But are there any things we can glean from how this is affecting open enrollment right now?
Great. Yes, we can. Health and Human Services Secretary Burwell tweeted that November 9th was the single biggest day of enrollment she's ever seen in the history of the Affordable Care Act. So really, the only way to read this is, a lot of people have been criticizing the Affordable Care Act because people have not signed up, and that's part of why we've seen these premiums increase this year. And then Donald Trump gets elected, and then you have a historic boom. I mean, Lizzie, connect the dots.
Dan Gorenstein, our healthcare reporter, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lizzie.
We just heard how the Affordable Care Act might change under a Trump presidency. One part of the ACA is women's health. Right now, women in the U.S. have access to birth control and other preventative care without co-pays or deductibles from their insurance companies. Plus, there is the question of Planned Parenthood and its funding. Sarah Cliff is a senior editor at Vox, and she writes primarily about healthcare. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've just been talking about the Affordable Care Act with our healthcare correspondent, and I guess since we're breaking down this subset of it, what would repealing the ACA do to and for women's health?
So there could be a lot of changes. One of the ones that comes to mind immediately is a change to the birth control mandate. So since 2012, the ACA has mandated that everybody, not just people in the marketplaces, everybody have access to no-cost sharing contraceptives. You can get an IUD at no cost, get birth control pills at no cost. That requirement has been quite popular. Lots of women have used it. It is one of the best liked parts of the Affordable Care Act, and that is something that could very easily be on the chopping block with repeal.
And my understanding is, and tell me how this works, that's not something that the president-elect would have to go to Congress for.
Yeah, it's kind of in a weird spot because of some regulatory factors. But the contraceptive mandate in Obamacare, it isn't actually part of the law. The law just says insurance companies have to cover preventative health benefits for women. It's up to the administration to decide what counts as a preventative health benefit. The Trump administration, day one, if they want, they can go in, they can write new regulations, scratch birth control off the list, and that takes effect pretty immediately. So Congress does not have to do anything as they would to repeal most other parts of the Affordable Care Act.
So let's say that happens. What would that mean for women economically?
It would mean spending a lot more money on contraceptives. And this would matter a lot for women who are getting birth control pills every month, who would probably face a $5, $10 copay depending on their insurance, especially for long-acting reversible birth controls, which can be quite expensive, like IUDs. Insurance companies, if they want, they can charge that all out of pocket, which could be up to $500, which is why you might have seen some articles flying around the internet this week saying, get your IUDs now before January and Trump comes into office, which I initially thought were quite alarmist. And, I didn't realize it was so different from the rest of the ACA, but it really does seem like this is something that could go away very quickly. And it would mean for women spending more on contraceptives It would probably mean more unintended pregnancies, too. The best research we have suggests when you have less access to birth control, you have more women getting pregnant unexpectedly.
One very controversial topic that we're going to dive into is Planned Parenthood. Trump campaigned, among other things, on a promise to defund Planned Parenthood. And this is a very thorny question, both in terms of policy, but also in terms of the economics of how something like Planned Parenthood works. So I would like you to walk us through what it means if a Trump administration says no federal money for Planned Parenthood whatsoever.
So you would probably see a lot less Planned Parenthoods is the kind of upshot of it. Planned Parenthood gets a lot of money from the federal government right now. And this is not for the abortion. There are federal regulations that do not allow the government to spend money on abortions. This is for the work they do.
Although we should say
control.
that
Yes.
people who are anti-abortion would say that money is fungible.
Sure. Yeah. So federal money can go to a clinic that provides abortions. Usually it's grants to increase screenings for cancer, to provide birth control to low-income women, to give them reproductive health counseling. It is true that it does go to abortion clinics. It goes to clinics like Planned Parenthood. And that is why you've seen this push over the past few years to defund Planned Parenthood, that anti-abortion advocates will argue, well, they couldn't be in the abortion business if they weren't getting all these federal grants. And they do seem to be right, that what you would expect is a lot of these Planned Parenthood clinics would likely shut down. There doesn't seem to be right now the infrastructure for other clinics to come in and take their place. You'd see a lot less Planned Parenthood clinics and not other clinics able to step up and fill that gap they would leave behind.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the follow-on question where folks who say there should not be government money for Planned Parenthood have also said, well, private businesses would come in and fill that gap. Private clinics would. Is there any evidence to support that private clinics would do that?
There isn't at the moment. The best evidence we have comes from Texas, which did defund Planned Parenthood clinics in 2013. So you see research coming out of the University of Texas where high-income women are able to get their services elsewhere, where they go to a different doctor, they're able to find something. Low-income women, they just get less health care. It does not seem to be the case that they just go to another provider. There's some other interesting research looking at states in the Midwest where reproductive health clinics closed. And again, they found that women who became further from a clinic, they just got less health care. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it, that if you have a reproductive health clinic maybe 3-5 miles away, maybe you'll go get your cervical cancer screening. It's not that much work. But if you're going to have to drive 25, 50 miles, like the preventative services they're providing are, for something that might or might not happen. So you might just say, you know what, it's not worth the work to get that screening. So the best research we have, it's admittedly a pretty small body of research. It does not suggest that other clinics step in to fill the place when Planned Parenthood goes away.
Sarah Cliff, senior editor at Vox, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to end this show with a break from politics and play you this week's edition of the Marketplace Quiz. That's when we ask actors, musicians, writers, and other people in the spotlight to share their stories about work, money, and the lessons they've learned along the way. This week, we've got the band Sleigh Bells.
Hey, this is Derek Miller.
And this is Alexis Krauss, and we are Sleigh Bells.
Alexis, what is something you bought that you now completely regret buying?
I tend to buy clothes that I never wear, but I have this one
So you're in the nude.
Right, constantly. No, but I actually have this one very vivid memory. I don't think it was purchased with my own money because I was probably about 9, but do you remember moon shoes? They were like the trampoline.
Trampoline? Yeah. Those were terrible.
I vividly remember having those and just thinking they were awful and realizing that it was a very poor purchase on behalf of myself.
I want to apologize to Moon Shoes Inc.
They didn't work.
Are they still in business?
Probably not. They were terrible, so don't buy moon shoes.
Okay. Sorry, Moon Shoes.
Derek, what was your first job?
I was a bag boy, a grocery dude at public supermarkets, and I held that job for about 6 weeks. And within 3 days, I knew who the good tippers were. who was cheap, and I kind of bullied my way into, like, I'd see, a lady come in with, like, or, she pull up to the register with, like, 2 carts, and there'd be somebody else there to bag, and I'd be like, get out of here. I swear, I feel ashamed.
Serious bag hustle.
I feel ashamed to admit that right now, and I still, that's a good thing that I feel guilty about that, at least. And, I got fired because I joined a hardcore band and didn't show up. Anyway, Publix, thank you.
That's a quality grocery store right there.
Great subs. I love Publix. Alexis, do you remember the first time you were paid to perform? This would have been a long time ago, like way pre-Sleigh Bells.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess it depends on what type of performance. Like, I was in a Nickelodeon magazine commercial and I winked at the camera. So if that counts as a performance, then I was about 10 years old. It was really hard to do.
And that's on the internet as well.
It is.
So please look.
Thank you, internet.
Yeah.
Derek, in a next life, what would your career be?
Head coach of an NBA team, without question.
You'd make a great coach.
Thank you. I'd like to think so. Because, I like to encourage people, and I don't necessarily need the spotlight, or actually prefer not to be in it at all. So, I want to coach the Miami Heat.
And you'd have, like, good coach dances that would get your team really excited.
Yeah, I have a really good coach dance, whatever that is. I don't know. I don't think I would have a dance. Pat Riley doesn't have a dance.
Okay.
So, Alexis, what is your most prized possession?
If creatures with beating hearts are considered possessions, which I think they are because I did purchase her, it would be my dog, my bull terrier, Rizla.
Yeah.
She's the love of my life.
Yeah, Rizla is a special creature. She comes on tour with us, and I don't know.
But if it wasn't a dog, it would probably be my milk foamer, my latte foamer.
Oh.
I just love that thing so much.
I was trying to imagine what a milk foamer was, because I don't drink coffee, so.
I brought it on the tour bus. I love it that much. What is something everyone should own, no matter the cost?
Band-Aids.
Probably a good pair of headphones. That's what I would think you would say.
I'm going to go with Band-Aids.
You're such an audiophile. No, you can go with Band-Aids.
Yeah.
Right.
I was thinking, I was going to try to say something sarcastic, but no, I mean, if you like cut your arm open or something, or like stub your toe, you got a Band-Aid, you're good.
Yeah, well, Band-Aids are notoriously extremely expensive, so it's a really good investment.
Not everybody has $5 sitting around.
This is true.
So
this is true.
I'm serious. So, Alexis, what advice do you wish somebody gave you before you started your career?
I guess for me, it always kind of comes back to just sort of self-confidence and standing up for myself and just sort of not taking criticism that was sort of unsolicited or came from the press too seriously. I don't want to say that I was damaged by anything in the beginning, but I think that hit me hard and was overwhelming at first, and I've developed a much thicker skin and become a much more confident, self-assured person. So I think just kind of being a little tougher about things like that.
Yeah. I probably should have just taken much better care of myself for the first couple of years. I was going to say that I think I got that advice a lot, but probably ignored it. So I probably, I wish I had taken that advice, but I'm cool.
Sleigh Bells' album, Jessica Rabbit, is out now. And that's our show for this week. Next week, we will get into more policy. We know there's still lots to talk about. Taxes, regulation, and more. We're also thinking about heading home for the holidays. So we'd like to know if you've managed ways to make it affordable and bearable. Come tell us. Visit marketplace.org, our Facebook page, or call us 1-800-648-5114. And yes, your voice might be featured on the air. Marketplace Weekend is produced by Haley Hirschman and Eliza Mills, with help this week from Cerise Castle. Dan Semitovich is our senior producer. Charlton Thorpe is our engineer. Our theme music is composed by Naren Rao. Satara Nieves is Marketplace's executive producer. Deborah Clark is our vice president. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening. This is APM.
What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me?
Welcome back to Haff in the Morning, and of course you remember that being the theme to the Wonder Years. Remember that great sitcom from the late 80s, early 90s? Well, Kevin and Arnold were meant to be friends forever. You know, Kevin Arnold and Paul Pfeiffer. And apparently so are their real-life counterparts, Fred Savage and Josh Saviano. The two Wonder Years pals attended the New York Rangers hockey game at Madison Square Garden recently, and Rangers fans definitely knew they were in the house as the Garden Vision screens showed clips from the Wonder Years before zooming into Savage and Saviano, who were laughing and cheering. After the game, the fifth straight win in a row, by the way, for the Rangers, the pair posed for photographs on the ice. You know, it's a good night at a New York Rangers game when Fred Savage and I end up in the net, said Saviano, who wrote the message on Instagram. It's time now for the CBS Weekend Roundup.
The CBS News Weekend Roundup, coming up next.
It's finally fall. The weather is cooling off, and there's no better time to upgrade your cookouts than right now. Let me tell you about Omaha Steaks. They have a huge menu of steaks and more. The process is convenient and quick, shopping delivered straight to your door. Every purchase is backed by Omaha Steaks' 100% unconditional guarantee. And right now, you can get the limited-time family grill pack for just $49.99. You get all of this: 2 5-ounce filet mignons, 2 5-ounce top sirloins, 4 4-ounce boneless pork chops, 4 3.5-ounce chicken fried steaks, 12-ounce package of all-beef meatballs, 4 4-ounce Omaha steak burgers, 4 4-ounce gourmet jumbo franks, a 16-ounce package of Omaha steakhouse fries, 4 caramel apple tartlets, OS seasoning packet, plus 4 additional Omaha Steaks burgers. Just for listening, Omaha Steaks is offering all of this for only $49.99. This is a huge savings. Go to omahasteaks.com, enter code FTN in the search bar, and add the family grill pack to your cart. Don't miss this deal. Visit omahasteaks.com and enter code FTN in the search bar to get over 30 gourmet items for just $49.99.
This is the CBS News Weekend Roundup. We like to think that radio news is your chance to share the experience of feeling history being made. We certainly had that feeling as Election Day stretched into Wednesday morning. As CBS's Charlie Rose put it,
Donald Trump wins the presidency in one of the greatest upsets in election history. Voters demanding a change cause a political earthquake.
We'll measure the tremors and explore the reasons. Just for instance, you'll hear CBS News correspondent Steve Futterman about Pennsylvania, a state Hillary Clinton had been counting on, but Donald Trump was the winner there.
Big cities went for Hillary Clinton, Philadelphia especially, Pittsburgh especially, but in between those cities, in rural areas, these people went for Donald Trump.
And we transition from calling him Trump on second reference. It's now Mr. Trump. That's what we do when speaking of presidents, former presidents, and the president-elect. I'm Dan Raviv in Washington. A lot more ahead on this Weekend Roundup, but let's begin with the morning after reports by our top campaign correspondents. Major Garrett had been traveling for months with Mr. Trump, describing how Tuesday unfolded.
Early returns and exit polls were discouraging, but despair soon gave way to joy as Trump's unshakable belief in voter turnout that would defy expectations and shatter all predictions materialized. And no matter how improbably, the presidency was Trump's.
The president-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
With characteristic flair and his family and campaign advisors in tow, Donald Trump began the transition from political phenomenon to commander-in-chief.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton,
saluting the vanquished Democratic nominee he once threatened to jail during an historically bitter campaign.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely.
With votes still being counted, Trump offered soothing words to the more than 58 million Americans who voted against him, vowing to pursue reconciliation.
For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people, I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together and unify our great country.
Trump said it was time for the country to dream big, and he promised massive investments in new infrastructure and a push to clean up America's inner cities.
America will no longer settle for anything less than the best.
As he has throughout the campaign, Trump said his administration would soften the blows of globalization with tougher policies on trade and immigration.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Living a history he uniquely saw as his political destiny, Trump said he would now focus on the fight ahead.
While the campaign is over, our work on this movement is now really just beginning.
Donald Trump, his running mate, future Vice President Mike Pence, and their families were on stage in a hotel ballroom. And barely 2 miles to the southwest, also in New York City, CBS's Nancy Cordes was at Hillary Clinton's party, designed as a celebration.
Where at first they had been jubilant. They were crying, they were shell-shocked, they were hugging each other for support as the night went on. This campaign had been so sure of victory based on its data that at 8 p.m., they told us she was putting the finishing touches on one of the 2 speeches they had prepared for her, a sign they all believed that she had won and might even be declaring victory on the early side. Their internal polling had showed her leading in the states that they considered her surest path to victory, holding Michigan, then winning Nevada, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. But turnout ended up being soft in some key urban areas, and suddenly Pennsylvania, where she had led throughout the entire election, was a nail-biter. Michigan, a nail-biter. Wisconsin, a state that aides freely admit wasn't even on their radar screen, a nail-biter. Clinton had not visited that state in 7 months. President Obama won that state by 7 points back in 2012. This all shows you why they thought a state like that might be a sure thing.
Talking about Wisconsin, where Trump was the winner. Though there is the suspicion that voters didn't tell the full truth to pollsters, some of them standing just outside asking questions, including, "Whom did you vote for?" CBS's Anthony Mason did find interesting motivations in the exit poll results.
The 3 key pillars of Donald Trump's victory were, first of all, men. He won men by 12 points, 53 to 41%. Secondly, he won whites without college degrees by 67 to 28%, more than 2 to 1. The most important quality voters were looking for yesterday was a candidate who could bring about change. Among those voters, Donald Trump won 83%. Now, there was a lot of concern after the Access Hollywood tape that Republicans might desert Trump, as some leaders unendorsed him. Well, he won 81% of conservatives, 81% of white evangelicals, and in the end, 9 out of 10 Republicans voted for Donald Trump.
Let's follow up with CBS News senior political editor Steve Chigaris. 59% of the American citizens who are eligible to vote did register and vote, about the same as 4 years ago. In fact, the percentage is up a little bit. No surprise there, though 4 out of 10 Americans who could vote don't bother to do so. Steve, how about the results? Victory for Mr. Trump. The results were surprising?
I believe they were. The Trump people were surprised, the Clinton people were surprised, and we were all surprised. The polling showed Hillary Clinton leading going into election night, and we saw what happened. I think
and not just the national popular vote. We knew to look at it state by state, and she seemed to be just ahead, though others like Florida and Ohio were too close to call, as we saw.
You have to watch the vote count as it comes in, because it does, and this is a cliche, but it comes down to turnout. And what we saw happen Tuesday night was the reason why Hillary Clinton lost, because her turnout was not nearly as robust as Donald Trump's. If you look at how many people turned out to vote for Hillary Clinton, she was off by millions of votes compared to what Barack Obama received in 2008 and 2012, and that proved to be the difference, especially in these battleground states.
Had Democrats known that she would not get as many votes in the key states as Barack Obama? Did they know that was almost for sure going to happen?
There was a sense that among certain demographics, she was going to lose support compared to Barack Obama. At the last minute, she was throwing huge rallies in places like Detroit and Philadelphia to try to boost turnout. She had Bruce Springsteen and the Obamas show up to Philadelphia the night before the election. These are signs that they knew that they had an issue with turnout. Now, did they think it was going to be such an issue that it was going to drop her to the level where she landed? I don't think anybody saw that coming.
We'll chat some more later with CBS's Steve Chigaris. Please stay tuned. Our coverage will resume with the protests that followed Election Day. Then we'll report on Donald Trump's visit to the White House and the Capitol on the CBS News Weekend Roundup. On the CBS News Weekend Roundup, I'm Dan Raviv. Election Day was, of course, Tuesday. The result was clear only on Wednesday morning, at least New York and Washington time. Both those cities had voted heavily for Hillary Clinton. Many people working in New York and D.C. said they felt that most people were tired, shocked, even disgusted that Donald Trump had won. And some people in big cities especially were so angry they went out to protest Wednesday and Thursday nights. Things got violent and destructive in Portland, Oregon.
This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is an unlawful gathering.
Police fired tear gas canisters to disperse crowds after a dumpster was set on fire and windows were smashed. Cole Miller of KOIN reported.
We saw flashbangs going off, rubber bullets, rubber projectiles being shot at the crowd to get them to disperse off some of the public transportation railways. At one point then we saw protesters, some of these demonstrators throwing glass bottles at these officers.
Police Sergeant Peter Simpson said the trouble was due to just a few of the protesters.
This is an anarchist group that is hijacked and inserted itself in a larger crowd.
Portland police made a few dozen arrests. In Los Angeles, around 200 arrests. Earlier that night, Thursday, CBS News correspondent DeMarco Morgan reported on what happened coast to coast.
Fires raged in Oakland, where 7,000 gathered, while an effigy of the president-elect burned in L.A. In Chicago, protesters shut down Lakeshore Drive, and activists lit up a better than bigotry message outside of the White House. It seems like everywhere there's a Trump building, there's an anti-Trump protest.
CBS's DeMarco Morgan in New York City, where a crowd blocked traffic on very busy Fifth Avenue near the president-elect's home, Trump Tower. And from inside, Mr. Trump on Twitter had two differing opinions, at first writing it was very unfair that the media incited professional protesters. But hours later, he wrote that he loves the fact that small groups might have passion for our great country. The president-elect added, "We will all come together and be proud." On Thursday morning, Mr. Trump came to Washington, invited by President Obama, the first time they ever met. Major Garrett reported.
The two spent 90 minutes alone discussing foreign and domestic policy and the logistics of handing over power.
I believe that it is important for all of us, regardless of party and regardless of political preferences, to now come together, work together to deal with the many challenges that we face.
Mr. Trump echoed those sentiments.
I very much look forward to dealing with the president in the future, including counsel. It was a great honor being with you, and I look forward to being with you many, many more times in the future. Thank you, sir.
As reporters were ushered out, Trump complimented his longtime foe.
Very good man. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
The Oval Office civility bore no relationship to the campaign trail.
Our president is incompetent.
On the economy, Donald Trump is uniquely unqualified to be our chief executive.
White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest.
The president's views haven't changed. He stands by what he said on the campaign trail. But the American people decided. The election is over.
Also reporting on Thursday, CBS's Nancy Cordes on the Trumps and their visit to the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, at the Capitol.
Let me just say how excited we are about these opportunities for the country.
A pragmatic House Speaker tabled months of animosity, giving Mr. Trump a tour of where he'll be inaugurated and even employing Mr. Trump's campaign motto.
We are now talking about how we're going to hit the ground running to make sure that we can get this country turned around and make America great again.
Mr. Trump said he would be doing, quote, spectacular things with Ryan and Senate Leader Mitch McConnell.
Whether it's health care or immigration, so many different things.
During the race, both Ryan and McConnell routinely condemned their own nominee. Their new détente is a fragile one. Trump wants to build a border wall, Ryan doesn't. But they do agree on dismantling Obamacare right away. Former GOP Senate aide Christopher Condoleezza says Republicans will move to repeal the law first, then debate how to replace it.
Congressional Republicans, as well as the Trump administration, will pursue some sort of transition period. Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? That remains to be seen.
Democrats picked up a few seats in the House and Senate, but not enough to block repeal. Senator Elizabeth Warren told a union group she is gearing up for a new reality.
If the Republicans want to strip away health insurance from 20 million Americans, if they want to let cancer survivors get kicked to the curb, if they want to throw 24-year-olds off their parents' health insurance, then we will fight them every step of the way.
Senator Elizabeth Warren ending that report by Nancy Cordes from Thursday. Senator Bernie Sanders, defeated, of course, by Hillary Clinton in the Democratic Party primaries, also declared that if Mr. Trump has the idea to help Americans with good jobs and wages, then Sanders will be with him. But the proud-to-be progressive Vermont senator wrote on Twitter, if Donald Trump takes people's anger and turns it against Muslims, Hispanics, African Americans, and women, we will be his worst nightmare. Let's continue our conversation with CBS News senior political editor Steve Chigaris. We were talking about Trump campaign officials just before Election Day claiming they would capture Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
I still don't believe that the Trump people in each of those states thought that they had a chance to win all of those states. And so that's why I think everybody was surprised on Wednesday morning when everybody woke up and saw that he had won the Electoral College majority.
Winning almost all the battleground states.
That's right. They felt that their support was being underrepresented in the polls, but there was not a general sense that they were beating Hillary Clinton in these places. And it comes down to who came out to vote. And it seems as if the Hillary Clinton people just did not come out at the numbers that they expected.
So late Tuesday night, it was really Wednesday morning, about 3 a.m. in New York City. Donald Trump delivered a victory speech that was gracious and thanked Hillary Clinton for her service to the nation. Hillary Clinton left her appearance till later that day. On Wednesday, she was gracious, too, obviously crushed, admitting that it hurt. What about this level of grace?
I think this year especially, the grace is necessary. You're looking at two candidates who are viewed very unfavorably by Americans. And so whoever was going to win has an uphill battle in convincing voters and Americans that they are the right choice to be the next president. So that's where Donald Trump is starting off. Hillary Clinton, again, who is somebody who is not very well liked by the electorate, has to come across as somebody that is trying to unify the country. You don't want to be a sore loser in this situation.
When Mr. Trump visited Mr. Obama in the Oval Office, he called the president a very good man. It's certainly a positive vibe.
A respectful tone, which I think a lot of his critics would say didn't exist during the campaign.
CBS News senior political editor Steve Chigaris. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Dan.
In some of California's ballot initiatives, voters rejected canceling the death penalty, but they did approve legalizing marijuana. Massachusetts, Nevada, and Maine also legalized all uses of pot or grass by adults. Up next, more about the election on the CBS News Weekend Roundup.
When your medical practice is growing fast and you have more patients than you have room for, you need to start, making some room. Which means all of a sudden, you're looking to buy new exam tables and stools, x-ray machines, and microscopes quickly. Business cards from American Express Open can give you buying power to help cover the big purchases you need to make when you need to make them. Find out how American Express cards and services can help prepare you for growth at open.com.
On the CBS News Weekend Roundup, I'm Dan Raviv. Foreign reaction to Donald Trump's victory in many countries, surprise. European newspaper front pages mocked American voters for choosing someone who's inexperienced and vulgar. But the leaders of Russia and Israel clearly welcomed the Trump victory. Israel did thank both Trump and Hillary Clinton for being good friends of the Jewish state. Syrian rebel groups who say they're fighting for democracy say this is bad for them, predicting Trump will side with Russia, pounding ISIS, it's true, but basically letting the Bashar al-Assad dictatorship in Syria continue. Reaction in Mexico, especially strong, almost all negative, as CBS's Manuel Bajorquez reports.
Trump has threatened to tear up the trade agreement between the U.S. and Mexico, putting millions of jobs at risk. He has also vowed to build a giant border wall and make Mexico pay for it. Claudia Ruiz Massieu is Mexico's foreign minister.
We would not consider paying for any wall that puts barriers between our integration and our competitiveness.
But if a Trump administration seems to be putting up a fight, is Mexico ready to fight back?
Well, Mexico is ready to protect our people, but we are also ready to work with the next American administration.
Mexican Senator Armando Rios Peter isn't taking any chances. He's drafted a law that would stop Mexico from using public funds to pay for a border wall. He also said Mexico could retaliate by revising security agreements with the U.S. Sounds almost like a threat, some would say.
No, the threat is what Trump is doing.
That from Mexico City. In this country, was it a complete surprise this past Tuesday when Donald Trump was the winner and Hillary Clinton the loser? CBS News correspondent Steve Futterman, you were covering the pro-Clinton gathering that was designed to be her victory party on Tuesday night in New York City. Just about everyone said they expected to celebrate the election of the first female president, right?
They thought they were there to see history. There were many women with their young daughters even. They wanted to especially experience what they thought was going to be an historic moment when the first woman president would be officially elected. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way.
But on the air here at CBS Radio News early Tuesday morning before the voting started, well, let's play an example of what you reported.
The Clinton campaign is very confident of victory today unless something drastically goes wrong. Their internal polls show Clinton with leads in enough significant states to give her the presidency. The biggest worry among Clinton officials is that somehow their polling data may be off and that somehow they have underestimated the strength of Donald Trump. And this is not an unreasonable concern. There have been many times during the past year that other Trump strengths have been incorrectly discounted.
And, Steve, that was based in part on your travels covering the last week or so of the presidential campaign. Where were you?
I was in what they call the Rust Belt. I was in the states of Ohio and Pennsylvania primarily. Did not get to Wisconsin, did not get to Michigan, but they are nearby. And I was sensing, at least from the Trump supporters, they kept telling me something is going on here. I even spoke to one gentleman in Youngstown, Ohio, right on the edge of the Pennsylvania border. He is a Democrat. He said, something is happening here. I am a bit worried. And this sort of was something that the Trump people were telling me was happening. I wasn't sure I was detecting it. Listen to this woman. She was someone I spoke to in Hershey, Pennsylvania. She is, for me, sort of the litmus test of what was taking place in Pennsylvania.
I supported Hillary Clinton 8 years ago, and I think a lot of people like myself have realized she is a different candidate this time around. She is just not the same.
This time, Steve, we detected only limited enthusiasm about a female for president.
And that woman, Dan, I think sort of symbolized what I came to see, especially outside the big cities. Big cities went for Hillary Clinton, Philadelphia especially, Pittsburgh especially, but in between those cities, in rural areas, these people went for Donald Trump.
CBS News correspondent Steve Futterman, usually in Los Angeles, but reporting on the start of the presidential transition. Here you are in Washington, D.C. Welcome, and thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Dan.
On Wednesday, just hours after Donald Trump's victory speech in New York, CBS News political director John Dickerson was on CBS This Morning, speaking with co-anchors Charlie Rose, Norah O'Donnell, and Gayle King.
So was it the rural vote in the Rust Belt that really propelled Donald Trump to the presidency?
Well, yes and no, but he also won Florida. I mean, so Florida and North Carolina, those are not Rust Belt states.
But if Michigan and Wisconsin had stayed in Democratic territory, Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States.
It wasn't just the Rust Belt.
And Florida.
What's interesting to me is how you turn this into a mandate. Of course, Donald Trump has a mandate in terms of the electoral vote, but when you look at the popular vote, it's pretty close.
As of Friday, almost all the votes counted. Hillary Clinton did have the lead, 60,449,000 votes. Donald Trump had 60,050,000 votes behind by about 400,000. That was John Dickerson, the host of Face the Nation on CBS every Sunday. Now, sad news. The death of poet and musician Leonard Cohen at age 82. Far too young to leave us, but he left us Hallelujah and other songs we'll remember. CBS's Anthony Mason looks back.
I've heard there was
the secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord.
One of the most influential songwriters of his generation, Leonard Cohen is best known for a ballad that became an anthem. Critic Alan Light says it's a song you almost didn't get to hear.
Hallelujah was a song that really tormented him. He talks about being in a hotel room in New York City, banging his head on the floor because he couldn't figure out where the song was. He wrote 75 or 80 verses for it.
Your faith was strong, but you needed proof.
Since its release in 1984 on Cohen's album Various Positions, more than 300 cover versions of Hallelujah have been recorded. Born in Montreal, Cohen started writing poetry in the 50s and began putting his words to music in the 60s. His last album was released just last month, and Cohen's song You Want It Darker hinted the end was near.
If you are the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you are the healer, means I'm broken and lame.
Poetry is just the evidence of life, Leonard Cohen once said. If your life is burning well, poetry is just the ash. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
On Friday, Americans who served in our country's military were honored. Some terrific ceremonies and gatherings for Veterans Day. Thanks to all of you. And please follow us on Twitter at CBS Radio News. I'm at Dan Raviv on the CBS News Weekend Roundup. On the CBS News Weekend Roundup, I'm Dan Raviv. The battle for control of Congress? Democrats had high hopes that they could recapture a majority in the U.S. Senate. They thought practically all year that Donald Trump is a weak candidate, dividing the Republican Party. So instead of coattails, a winning candidate for president helping the Republicans running for office lower down the ballot, Trump would be a burden, a dead weight for Republicans. Suffice it to say, that's not how things turned out. With 34 Senate races, the Democrats needed a net gain of 4 seats, plus a victory for Hillary Clinton so that Tim Kaine would be vice president and break the tie in any 50-50 vote. In the House, Democrats would have needed a net gain of 30. They failed. CBS News correspondent Steve Dorsey has details.
Democrats won 2 new seats in the Senate, one by Illinois Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth, then a big upset in New Hampshire where Governor Maggie Hassan ousted Kelly Ayotte. Hassan declared victory with a margin of just a few hundred votes.
It's up to all of us, elected leaders, citizens now, to come together and focus on our common challenges and our common opportunities.
Ayotte conceded Wednesday. Democratic control of the Senate could have been a major check to Trump, with the party able to block conservative Supreme Court appointments. Instead, Democrats can only filibuster. In the House, a similar story. Republicans have lost just 6 seats. A couple races are still too close to call. Speaker Paul Ryan now plans to move forward with an ambitious agenda.
Now, Donald Trump will lead a unified Republican government. And we will work hand in hand on a positive agenda to tackle this country's big challenges.
Democrats scrambling to rebuild their party with an eye now on the 2018 midterm elections. Steve Dorsey, CBS News, Washington.
Now let's hear what the successful campaign manager for Donald Trump had to say after getting, we think, no sleep at all on Tuesday night. Kellyanne Conway is a veteran pollster who gets a lot of credit from political observers for adjusting Trump's style, getting him to stick mostly to the teleprompter with fewer controversial ad-libs. Here's Kellyanne Conway Wednesday on CBS This Morning with Norah O'Donnell, Gayle King, and Charlie Rose, who asked about the concession phone call from Hillary Clinton.
It was a very gracious conversation about 2:30 a.m. or so. Our plan was really just to wait and see if the rest of the states and the presidency had been called. And in the meantime, my phone rang, and I handed it to Mr. Trump, and he and Secretary Clinton had a brief but very gracious, very warm conversation. He commended her on how smart and tough she is and what a great campaign she ran. And she congratulated him on his victory.
He did talk about bringing the country together. What are some of the immediate steps that he will take in order to do that?
You know, we can learn an awful lot from those who don't support us. And that's one thing that we even tried to do here at the Trump campaign was listen to people and hear what their concerns are, their frustrations, their fears. And I think that will continue in a Trump presidency.
Will you share with us how that conversation came about with Donald Trump and President Obama?
That was also a very cordial conversation among, between two men who had been at battle, frankly. I mean, President Obama was really trying to transfer his considerable popularity and political currency over to Hillary Clinton. And I think he and the First Lady, Michelle Obama, went all out for Hillary Clinton.
Kellyanne, it is being described as the biggest political upset in history. Some people are even using that phrase. When did you guys know that this was going to happen?
About 2.5 weeks ago, it started to come together, Gail. We had really navigated and survived a number of darker days here on the campaign, and we started to notice a few things, that we were becoming more competitive in some of these traditionally blue states. And these are states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that are very attracted to the Donald Trump message of creating jobs, bringing back manufacturing jobs, certainly curbing illegal immigration, talking about fairness to the American worker, creating new jobs, and I think, frankly, just being an outsider. But what really started to crystallize is that we noticed all of the time that Hillary Clinton had a difficult time in each of these swing states getting at 45, 46, 47%, let alone the 50% plus that President Obama achieved twice. And then I think the perfect storm was completed by Obamacare premiums increasing in October. People were literally opening up their mailboxes, clicking onto their computers, and finding the notices that their premiums were exploding under Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. So it really all came together. Mr. Trump stuck to the issue set, continued to run the campaign as he always has with these big rallies, and wherever we went, literally, any stop that we added, he had huge crowds.
Kellyanne Conway, campaign manager for Donald Trump, speaking on Wednesday morning, a few hours after victory. You may have wondered, because 3 of Donald Trump's 5 children had prominent roles in his campaign, might they become government officials? Apparently not. First of all, Donald Jr., Eric, and Ivanka all are senior executives of the family-owned company that deals in real estate and hotels mostly. The president's supposed to put his financial holdings in a blind trust, and traditionally he'd say he's paying no attention to his investments, not while he's president of the United States. In addition, there's an anti-nepotism law passed in 1967 banning public officials, including the president, from appointing any family member to head an executive agency. It's believed that would include being White House chief of staff, so that won't be Ivanka Trump. Now, fear expressed by people who came to this country from Latin America, some interviewed by CBS News correspondent Carter Evans in Southern California, admitting they're not in this country legally.
Immigrants are determined to keep President-elect Trump from following through on his campaign threat to deport millions, like Yamilex Rustrian.
If I get deported the day of tomorrow, I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere. I obviously have family, but I would feel lost.
She's afraid her family will be ripped apart, as so many were the last 2 times the U.S. government forced out immigrants en masse.
It's a tough feeling not to know the person that was your father. This is my father.
Former U.S. Congressman Esteban Torres' father was one of an estimated 2 million immigrants who were shipped out of the country as part of a government campaign to save American jobs during the Great Depression. It was called Mexican repatriation.
So they just rounded them all up?
Rounded them all up and shipped them back to their home country.
Just 3 years old, Torres was allowed to stay in the U.S. with his mother because he was born here. But roughly 60% of those sent across the border were American-born children.
It was rough. I remember living in shacks, My mother couldn't afford anything better.
And it all happened again in the 50s during Operation Wetback, when another 250,000 immigrants were sent back across the border. UCLA professor Raul Hinojosa Ojeda.
It's a really dark part of U.S. history. These roundups did capture and break up families that have consequences even today.
Torres never saw his father again.
It left me with a taste of how cruel authorities can be.
He just hopes President Trump doesn't repeat history. Carter Evans, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Of course, with all the momentous news this past week, we'll have more on the choice that American voters made and what it means, a big political shift after 8 years of Barack Obama. Next on the CBS News Weekend Roundup.
Get the latest information when you want it. Download the CBS Radio News app, either on iOS or Android. You also get great features, breaking news, and access to the CBS Radio News Twitter and Facebook feeds. Learn about your world while you take care of all the things you need to take care of. It's perfect for the gym, running errands, or doing chores around the house. CBS Radio News. Get it in the Apple App Store or Google Play today.
On the CBS News Weekend Roundup, I'm Dan Raviv. The election of Donald Trump, the non-politician, reality TV star, real estate billionaire, to be president of the United States is a very sharp change. During the campaign, Mr. Trump condemned the man who's been president for the past almost 8 years as a failure. But as we reported, when Mr. Trump sat with Barack Obama in the Oval Office, after 90 minutes of private talks this past Thursday, Trump praised the president.
Very good man. Thank you, guys.
Still, government policies are about to change, probably a lot, and liberals, the vast majority of them having voted for Clinton, have been licking their wounds, some of them signing petitions to the Electoral College, begging the electors not to confirm Donald Trump to be president. And we've reported on protests in the streets in some cities. Folks chanting, "Not my president," in New York City. As of Tuesday morning, Clinton supporters had been truly confident that she would win. The Trump team said our candidate can win if things break our way. So CBS News political analyst Leonard Steinhorn, professor at American University, was the result a surprise?
Well, in terms of public perception, surprising may be too mild a word when you think about the fact that virtually every single poll had her winning by 3, 4, 5, 6 percentage points, had her winning the Electoral College. Some people estimating upwards in the mid-300s beating Donald Trump in the Electoral College. But he ran the table on every single battleground state. Everyone he needed, he won. There should have been some indication when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and the Democratic team were rushing to Pennsylvania and rushing to Wisconsin and rushing to Michigan at the last minute. They had to detect that there was something going on in those states, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened.
And it might have looked like they were having fun, the Obamas endorsing Hillary Clinton and speaking about her and famous musicians playing music. But it's not fun in the last few days of a presidential campaign. Now we realize it may have been desperation.
It was desperation. It was an attempt to get the voters out. It was an attempt to motivate people. Hillary Clinton did not have enthusiasm behind her. She did not have that wind in her sails. Donald Trump did. He kept saying that the best indication of what he'll do in this election are the size of his crowds, the energy there. And it turns out that Donald Trump, who had never run for office before, figured something out there.
Which is the energy of a rally and all that free TV publicity without even buying as much advertising as Clinton did. It can work in modern American society. If there's something special about you, even if it's sometimes vulgar and people object, and even some Republicans objected, it got him so much attention for his message of America first and take care of this country. That resonated with enough people.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was able to drive the political narrative from day one. And he treated it almost as if it were a reality show with plot twists and turns, the unexpected, the surprises. Even when he got bad news, he was still the center of attention. He was able to dominate the conversation in this country. And sure enough, that turned out that he dominated the vote.
How about the message in his acceptance speech, his victory speech in New York, especially that he had nice things to say about Hillary Clinton, praising her public service and saying we should thank her, and I mean it sincerely, not even a hint anymore that she was crooked or criminal or ought to be in jail.
Sure, and nothing about a rigged election, certainly, because he won it. But he was gracious in his speech. He knows that right now he will be presiding over a deeply divided country, a country that has really severe doubts about him. He knows he has to knit this society back together under his leadership. He's going to have to find a way to make people feel comfortable with Donald Trump as president of the United States. He's going to have to figure out how to go beyond his bellicose rhetoric from the campaign and reach out to some of the people who opposed him.
And his goals, even in his victory speech, he set out very ambitious goals, such as doubling the economic growth of the United States, creating many jobs, things that he'd said before. And by the way, he did not repeat that he would build a wall to keep out immigrants from Latin America or make Mexico pay for it. It was a gracious speech, but it did contain big promises that any president, no matter how talented, would find very difficult to do.
Some of the things he said in his speech actually may reach across the political divide. Rebuilding the infrastructure, that's very popular among the Democrats. Supporting veterans, that's very popular among the Democrats. Obviously, economic growth is as well. Some of the more divisive ideas from his campaign, whether it's building the wall, as you say, or keeping people of the Muslim faith out of the country, he didn't mention those things. That's where it's going to be a lot tougher to implement. But those were also key promises of his campaign, so we'll have to see how he goes ahead and actually puts them into practice.
That's CBS News analyst, Professor Leonard Steinhorn. Thank you for being with us throughout campaign 2016.
My pleasure, Dan. Thank you.
We end our weekend roundup with a profile of Melania Trump, the future First Lady who had tea in the White House with Michelle Obama on Thursday while their husbands were having their private chat. Mr. Trump tweeted later that his wife really liked, quote, Mrs. O. Here's a report that evening by CBS News correspondent Margaret Brennan.
Melania Trump will make history when she becomes First Lady, the only one to grow up in a communist nation, the former Yugoslavia, and only the second born abroad in nearly 200 years. The former fashion model, who speaks 5 languages, will soon have to decide how to use her new platform, according to Anita McBride, who served Laura Bush.
I think that she's given us a little bit of a hint of what she thinks she would like to work on, and that is the issue of social media with young children.
Children and teenagers can be fragile.
Mrs. Trump gave only 2 major speeches during the campaign, and one, her convention address, plagiarized from Mrs. Obama's 2008 speech. She'll follow the high-profile First Lady, who championed healthy eating and did star turns on late-night television.
It's a position description that gets rewritten with each person, and we will adapt to it. The White House will adapt to its new occupant, and the occupants will adapt to the White House, and so will Americans.
One thing in common, both will have raised young children in the White House. 10-year-old Barron Trump will be the youngest boy in the executive mansion since JFK Jr. White House spokesman Josh Earnest.
Mrs. Obama has talked before publicly about the stresses and anxieties of moving to a new place, living inside a fishbowl, living inside a museum, and raising her family there. And I'm sure that Mrs. Trump is feeling many of those same anxieties.
Joshua Earnest, spokesman for the White House, just now launching a transition. President Obama has told his team, in fact, in every government agency, employees are instructed to cooperate fully and help the incoming Trump people start their jobs for the success of the United States of America. The new president, Donald J. Trump, to be sworn in on January 20th here in Washington, D.C. Thanks for listening. Anytime you want to hear us, including past episodes, do an internet search for CBS Weekend Roundup or use our app for your smartphone. The free app is CBS Radio News. The Weekend Roundup is produced by Howard Arenstein in Washington. I'm Dan Raviv. Have a great week.
Well, my friends, we're nearly done with today's broadcast, but before we go, let's check in with the news desk one more time and find out what's going on the national and international scene. And for that, we switch it over to CBS.
CBS News. I'm Steve Dorsey. Protesters rallying in New York's Union Square against President-elect Donald Trump. Similar demonstrations today also in L.A., where about 200 people were arrested last night, and in Chicago. WBBM's Mike Krauser.
This is an extremely large and mostly young crowd. They are going right past the Trump Tower right now, and I am standing on a bench on the river looking out over the crowd, and I'm seeing finger after finger raised in salute at the Trump Tower.
Mr. Trump's transition team is taking shape, but we haven't heard much about who will get the top jobs in his administration. Roll call columnist John Allen.
It's a little bit hard to tell because there's still such turmoil within his camp in terms of who's running things on his transition, who's going to get cabinet jobs. We still haven't heard the naming of a chief of staff. There's a competition there between Steve Bannon, who ran Breitbart, the alt-right website, and Reince Priebus, the Republican Party chairman.
A suicide bombing inside the heavily fortified U.S. air base at Bagram, Afghanistan, killed 4 Americans, according to the Pentagon. Our Cammie McCormick has more.
Defense Secretary Ash Carter said 2 U.S. service members and 2 U.S. contractors died in the explosion. 16 other American service members were wounded. The blast happened early this morning at the air base. The U.S. military said in a statement it was an explosive device, but didn't offer any more details. The Taliban has claimed responsibility.
Military analyst, retired Army Colonel Jeff McCausland.
This is the most heavily fortified, probably the most important base the United States still retains in Afghanistan, because it's the primary point for bringing in troops, taking troops out, bringing in supplies, because of the control of the airfield. And it was, without question, one of the bloodiest attacks in the last 8 years.
A mistrial in the case of a white former Ohio cop who killed a black man, prosecutor Joe Dieters.
I still think it's murder, and I think that we proved it.
A memorial service in New York this morning marked the 15th anniversary of the crash of American Airlines Flight 5878 in Belle Harbor. 265 people were killed. Authorities near Pittsburgh say a man who stabbed 6 people at a mental health treatment center will be charged with attempted homicide.
The suspect, 38-year-old Dustin Johnson, walked off the elevator on the 5th floor of the facility in the Pittsburgh suburb of Homestead and brandished a weapon. That's according to this employee.
He just said, "You ruined my life." I don't know why he did it. He hasn't been a patient of ours for a number of weeks.
All of the victims recovering at a Pittsburgh hospital. 1 remains in critical condition. 4 others are reported to be stable. The suspect is also hospitalized. Police officials say he will face attempted homicide and related charges. Maria Gabriel, CBS News, Pittsburgh.
This is CBS News.
Need a website? Why not do it yourself with Wix.com? No matter what business you're in, Wix.com has something for you. Used by more than 84 million people worldwide, Wix.com makes it easy to get your website live today. You need to get the word out about your business? It all starts with a stunning website with hundreds of designer-made, customizable templates to choose from, and the drag-and-drop editor. There is no coding needed. You don't need to be a programmer or designer to create something beautiful. You can do it yourself with Wix.com. Wix.com empowers business owners to create their own professional websites every day. When you're running your own business, you're bound to be busy. Too busy. Too busy worrying about your budget. Too busy scheduling appointments. Too busy to build a website for your business. And because you're too busy, it has to be easy. And that's where Wix.com comes in. With Wix.com, it's easy and free. Go to Wix.com to create your own website today. The result is stunning.
The sky's falling, literally, CBS News correspondent Jim Chenevey explains.
What the heck is that? A mysterious piece of space junk fell from the sky and landed in a jade mine in Myanmar. It's the size of a large car and appears to be wreckage from a rocket or missile. A Chinese satellite is believed to have been launched into space the same day, although it's unclear if the two are connected. Residents of a nearby village say they heard a huge crash. A second smaller piece of space debris had sliced through a house, but no one inside was hurt. Jim Chenevey, CBS News.
New Yorkers upset with the results of the election have found another outlet for their blues, a Manhattan subway station. More than 1,500 people have shared their grief on blank pastel notes posted to the wall of a long tunnel in the Union Square station. One reads, "Everything will be all right." Another, "You will not divide us. Love is everything, and it doesn't end today." Steve Dorsey, CBS News.
All right, and that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Haff in the Morning. I'll be back again tomorrow for another edition of said program. So with that being said, I bid you adieu, and in the words of the late, great Jack Larkin, my time is up. Thank you for yours.
God bless America.
Can I get a rib? All right. Paul, we got ribs, we got hot dogs, we got... Oh, my goodness, that's hot. And we'll have highlights for you tonight at 9, 10, and 11. I think I just burnt my finger. Let's send it back to you, Paul. That thing was hot.
Yeah.